Welcome to the Shema podcast series, The Power of the Hebrew Months with Rabbi Pill. Each month of the Jewish year carries its own unique energy, a spiritual rhythm woven into creation itself. Our sages teach that the months are not just markers of time, but windows of opportunity, each with its own avoda and pathway for growth. In this monthly series, Rabbi Pill and I will guide you into the flow of sacred time. Together, we'll uncover the spiritual work, the inner energy, and the actions you can take to stay in sync with the month. Tools to lift you to new levels of awareness and growth. Think of it as your spiritual workout routine, written into the Torah's calendar. Month by month, we'll train the soul, awaken new strengths, and live more fully in harmony with Hashem's design for time. Join us as we journey through the Hebrew months and discover how to channel the energy of time into lasting, personal transformation. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Shema podcast, another installment of the Power of the Hebrew Months, the month of Sivan. You know, this month, it was so fascinating as I was learning, and I'm just really excited that I'm sitting here with Rabbi Pill to delve into all this in a much deeper way. But I was, contemplating this idea that in the beginning, it was just Hashem, oneness. And there was this tsutzum and this multiplicity that was created in the world for there to be another. And this idea of giving us the Torah is a way to find the oneness within the multiplicity. And this is really what the month of Sivan is all about. It's the movement from fragmentation, from differentiation and finding the wholeness within all of it, between us internally, between soul and body, and between us as Kalei Yisrael, as a people. So Rabbi Pill, thank you for being here with us once again. I'm excited to really delve into this deeper. There's only so much you can get from the textbook, and it just gets me really more excited to actually come to these episodes and then explore the ideas with you in more depth. So thank you, and looking forward to learning from you today.
Back again. It's good to be doing this once more.
So let's start with this idea that the mazel. What's the Hebrew word? The English word is twins. Tu'umim. Okay. Yeah. And we know it from the, Gregorian calendar, the mazel is Gemini, which I guess means twins as well. But there's a lot there that why the month, when we're talking about finding, again, we're talking about unifying everything, but it's around unifying what's differentiated. And I think that sort of hints at why twins is the mazel.
So for the month of Sivan, I think, right, the place to start is, of course, as you already indicated, that the month is dominated by Shavuos. Even in terms of the Torah, the way the Torah associates the month, the first time we're introduced to the third month of the calendar, the month of Sivan, is at the beginning of Parshas Yisro, where the Torah is given. And the Torah says that in the third month, the Jews arrive at the desert of Sinai, and they camp at the mountain, and they prepare to receive the Torah. And 6 days, a few days later, they receive the Torah. They prepare for several days, and then they receive the Torah. So the whole tone of the month is, of course, set immediately as we begin the month. And as soon as we begin the month, we're already in the preparation days for Shavuos, for receiving the Torah. So clearly, huge part of the tone of the month and the avoda, the spiritual work that this month is going to focus on is communicated to us in big ways by the Torah itself. And so one of the ways to understand a lot of the symbolism that we find in the Sefer Yetzirah, the mazel with twins, and the letter Zion, and which correlates to the number 7, and other aspects that the energy that creates the month of Sivan manifests as, it's all going to filter through the idea of Torah. So I think just to take a step back and maybe let's just take a big picture view of the Torah. And I think once we have a big picture sense of what Torah is for and what it's doing, we can then use that to kind of deductively sort of feed into all of the other aspects of the month. One of the core functions of Torah, right? Torah is the blueprint for how, to bring this world to where it's supposed to get to. Creation began with, or before creation, we began with absolute and total unity. Creation begins with disunity, the very first movement from the singularity of God to a diversity of creation, which ultimately unfolds into an infinite diversity from the infinite oneness of God to an infinite diversity of the created material world. The very first move, of course, has to be from one to two, right? We have to move from singular into a duality. And that's the first thing that happens. And from that initial movement from one to two, the two multiplies into four and to eight and to so on and so forth. I'm not so good at math, but eventually we have a world that we have now where we have literally endless differentiation and diversity and particularity and difference. One day is not the same as the next day, and one person is not the same as the next person. I'm just staring at your desk right now. One tissue in the box is not the same as the other tissue in the box, right? They're all tissues, and yet each and every one of those tissues is going to be a different tissue, and each blade of grass is different, and each cell within each blade of grass is different, and so on and so forth. They're all distinct realities from each other. So we go from this massive unity to this massive, huge, unfathomable almost multiplicity. And the goal of it, of course, is all to bring it back to unity all over again. As we've spoken about many times, the purpose of creation, God's purpose behind creation, or one of the purposes behind creation, as the Kabbalists and others of the rabbis have taught us or have conceptualized it, is that God began with a certain degree of unity, and God wants to reveal unity, his qualities, and the unified nature of all of his diverse qualities in a much more profound way than could have been revealed prior to creation, so to speak. And so the move is to reveal an ultimate unity. And so we're moving from unity into diversity and then back into unity from diversity or within diversity. And the Torah is, of course, the blueprint for that.
Something, because it seems a little confusing. It's like the creator says, I want to create diversity, but for the goal of bringing it right back to where we started, which is unity.
Yeah.
So what I'm wanting clarity on is there's obviously a difference between the original unity and the later unity that we're striving for. Explain that.
Exactly. So many of the Kabbalists have sort of discussed exactly that question. If you read many of the texts, early Kabbalistic texts, on a relatively superficial level, or just reading what the words say, it would seem that we're going from unity to diversity and back to unity again. Then why not just start where you came from and not go through this whole charade of diversity just to get back to where the starting point, right? Like, why run the race? You're just going to end up back at the starting line anyway. So one of the common, not one of the common, but really the universal understanding of what's going on is that the unity that's revealed afterwards reveals something much higher and much deeper and much more profound than the unity that existed before. And there are different ways to understand how that happens. And different Kabbalists in the Lubavitch and the Chabad Lubavitch tradition, certain ones of the Lubavitch Rebbes, the fifth Rebbe, the sixth Rebbe, discuss this quite a lot, have their own conception of what we're gaining in the new unity that is going to come in the future versus the original unity. And other Kabbalists in other traditions also have other theories about what is being revealed more deeply. But most fundamentally, you can say either that the unity that existed before creation was sort of a simple unity. The way the Arizal describes it, it's an achdus hapashut. It's a simple unity. There is no complication. There is no diversity. Diversity is impossible. But it's a much more impressive thing to reveal how diversity is actually unified. When there's no diversity, sure, everything is unified. That's easy. Right. But when there is infinite diversity, and then to be able to reveal that infinite diversity is also unity and doesn't detract from unity and actually enhances unity, that's cool. That's a cool trick. All right. And not to put it too flippantly, but almost as if God is saying, I want to reveal the really cool aspect of my unity, right? I want people to appreciate not just oneness. Oneness is nice. I can go up on the top of a mountain and do my ohms and appreciate oneness. But to appreciate oneness within diversity and through diversity, that's a much more profound thing, because that oneness that's going to occur, and we've mentioned this many times, we've talked about this before, the oneness that we're going to encounter at the end goal, when things get to where they need to go, is an absolute oneness that doesn't take anything away from the diversity that's already present. The diversity is fully present. The Rambam sort of describes this in his descriptions of Mashiach, of the Messianic era. He says, the world's going to be the way the world is. Nothing dramatic is going to change exactly. The world is going to be the same material world we exist in, except that material world is going to be profoundly revelatory of the absolute and total unity of God. Within that diversity, this is the Chabad idea of dira b'tachtonim, which is developed very, very extensively by the Rebbes in Chabad, that God wants to reveal the fact that not only can my unity exist in a realm where unity is the only thing, but my unity can also exist in a realm where diversity is absolute, and still it doesn't detract from my unity, and my unity doesn't detract from the diversity. So that's one way of understanding what's going on over here. There's another way of understanding this also, which I think is important and profound, and will maybe relate to what we'll talk about in terms of Torah. Based on the Arizal, we can also say that the unity that existed before creation was sort of a unity of all parts that is effectively forced. The way the Arizal describes it, he likens this to the structure of Adam and Eve and the initial creation of Adam and Eve. The Torah, the Medrash describes that Adam and Eve are created as a single human being, and one side, the front side of the human being is male and the back side of the human being is female. And there's one being and they're just back to back stuck to each other. And that is the cleaving the unity of male and female. Wow, into a single being. That's cool. But then God says, Lo tov hayos adam levado. It's actually not ideal. That's not the highest level of unity, because that's like saying that I'm unified with my finger. I'm not unified with my finger. My finger has no choice but to be part of me, and I have no choice to be part of my finger. We enjoy total and absolute continuity, but there's no relationship with my finger. Right? That's not a deep unity. That's a forced unity. And so what the Arizal describes is that God then puts Adam to sleep, puts the human to sleep, and separates the male and the female, so that then they can come back together face to face as two separate beings and join together into one being from a place of diversity. And that's unity through relationship. That's much deeper, much more profound, much more experientially rich. And that's what God wants to offer us likewise in terms of appreciating God's unity, not a forced unity where we are just part of God. The Baal HaSulam describes this also. He describes the journey of the soul. The soul begins in absolute unity with God. The soul is, so to speak, carved off of God and put down here into a human being, all so that the human being can go through the experience of being in this world to get back to God after it dies. Just stay there in the first place, right? So he explains, again, the same idea, that the experience of being at one with God after you appreciate the fact that you have the experience of two different beings, a creator and a created being, that can now be in relationship to each other and come to unity through relationship. That's much deep. That's a much more powerful kind of unity. So that's the unity we're working towards, and the Torah is fundamentally going to be the blueprint for that, right? That the Torah, God gives us the Torah, God creates the Torah, God looks the world, the entire world is created through the blueprint of the Torah. The Medrash and the Zohar says God looks into the Torah to create the world. In a certain sense, Torah pre-exists creation, and creation is mapped on to the basic framework of the Torah. Torah is a blueprint for this process, this experience of beginning with unity, moving from unity into deep, deep, deep diversity, which also includes confusion, and separation, and tension, and conflict, and so on and so forth. And through all of that, working through all of that with Torah as a guide, bringing us back to a deeper sense of unity that comes through relationality and through separateness. And so Torah is going to be the blueprint for that. The month of Sivan then, which is the month of the giving of the Torah, is going to be dominated by that idea, by that experience. And there's a lot to say about this in terms of Torah itself. I think it's very worthwhile to just explore these aspects of Torah to help us understand sort of what's going on over here, right? That the Torah itself is a framework for moving from unity into diversity back into a much deeper unity.
Let's maybe begin by discussing some archetypes of twins in the Torah, because through comparing and contrasting, sometimes we can get more clarity on this very idea. And one of the things my text was talking about, if you could speak to comparing and contrasting Moshe and Aaron, which were brothers, not actual twins, but the archetype for this idea, and Yaakov and Esau.
Yeah, right. So, okay, so we have the energy of Sivan, the Sefer Yetzirah tells us, manifests in the phenomenon of twins, right? Brothers, partners, siblings that are sort of joined together with each other. And we have many models of this in the Torah. An ideal model is Moshe and Aaron. You see the interactions between Moshe and Aaron, right? Moshe and Aaron are very, very different people. Many commentators talk about how Moshe and Aaron are profoundly different characters. Moshe is a profoundly truthful character. Moshe is rooted in this is the way things are and this is the way the rules are. And Moshe is deeply associated with justice. Moshe is associated with the sphere of Netzach, which is on the right side. It's sort of a forceful sphere. You see in Moshe's character, as described to us in the Torah, Moshe generally is a forceful character, right? He sees something wrong and he does something about it. He doesn't try to reconcile. He kills the Egyptian. Egyptian beating slave owner beating a Jewish slave, and what does he do? He kills the Egyptian slave owner. Right? There's no, well, have you tried talking to your slave and have you tried listening to your master? Can we bring the two sides together? No, there's no reconciliation here. There's justice, right? Hard justice. Moshe is the giver of the Torah, and the Torah, in its sort of black letter form, is justice. It's rules. It's do this. Don't do that. Here's what's right. Here's what's wrong. This is what's pure. This is what's impure. This is what's kosher. This is what's not kosher. And if you break the rules, bad things happen to you. We just read this in last week's parsha, right? When we read the Tochacha, the threatened and unfortunately oftentimes visited upon us penalties for sort of rejecting the covenant that we have with God through the Torah, and bad stuff happens. This is harsh. And Moshe is the conduit for that. On the other hand, you have Aaron. Aaron is very much not this at all, right? Aaron is Ohev Shalom V'rodev Shalom. He's a person who's constantly seeking peace, loves peace, and in truth, compromises truthfulness in order to achieve peace. The classic formulation of what does Aaron do in order to achieve peace? Well, Aaron lies in order to achieve peace, right? Aaron hears about two people fighting and he goes to party A and says, hey, I spoke to party B and party B feels really bad about this conflict and really he's feeling like he wants to reconcile with you and is happy to, concede to whatever needs to be conceded. But, he feels very embarrassed and can't really face you. And so, maybe you could start the conversation. And then he would go to party B and say the exact same thing about party A. And none of it was true, right? Aaron is a liar, okay? Now, the Torah has a very important conception of truth and falsehood, which is not the same as we often think of in terms of telling the truth and telling a lie. Truth and falsehood, sheker and emes, is really about, in the Torah's conception, what's grounded in wholesome, positive, appropriate reality. And for sure, there are times where lying is inappropriate even for good ends. But on the other hand, the ends do matter. And if I'm telling a white lie in order to achieve a good, peaceful resolution to a conflict, then Aaron's perspective on this is, of course we do that. Aaron and Moshe are two very different people. Aaron, in a certain sense, is the white fire of Torah, right? So the Zohar describes the Torah as black fire on white fire. We have black letters written on white parchment. The letters are concrete. The halachic rule is that every letter has to be surrounded by white parchment, meaning each and every letter has to have its own distinct and separate form from every other letter. And each word has to be separate from every other word. And if you have two letters that are touching, the black ink of two letters that are touching each other in the Torah is invalid and it has to be fixed. The black fire of Moshe's rules is very strict and divided and concrete and with precise parameters. And the white fire of Aaron is just expansive and all-encompassing, and all of the black letters are unified with each other through the white parchment that they're sitting on. And the two of them, Moshe and Aaron, are the classic pair, right? These ideal leadership. You can't have leadership with just Moshe. You also can't have leadership with just Aaron. But when you put the two together and they're capable of each contributing what they're suited to contribute while not trying to dominate the other because they appreciate that what they bring to the table is not everything, because they have the humility to appreciate that, then you have a good leadership model. And this is Moshe and Aaron, each one seeing what they are and who they are, leaning into their nature, their character, their purpose, understanding that their nature, their character, and their purpose is not the be-all and end-all of everything. It's only a small part of the bigger picture. And therefore, they have to join and be interdependent with somebody else who can help them out with this.
That clears up something for me, because one of my questions I had in my mind was, I was going to ask you about, was the whole idea that Torah is about permitted and prohibited. It's like, that's all we do is we go through with halakas. Can't do that, can't do this, when you're separating everything. But what you said also spoke to something we've talked about before, our teaching from the Baal Salam, about how you can understand all of creation through the human body, which he's quoting David HaMelech as well. That you look in the mirror and you see one person, but the only reason are that we exist and function as a whole is because we have very distinct parts, each doing their own thing. There is the halakha. The liver cell is the liver cell. The heart cell is the heart cell. There's delineation, but yet they're all working together in tandem with one another, which is, like you said, the Moshe and the Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, even so, this is true so far, so much so that Rabbi Shlomo Eliashiv, the Leshem Shavov Achlamo, I quote often. He's one of my guys, but he writes specifically about the first two commandments. Right, the first two commandments in the Ten Commandments, in the Aseret Hadibros, which we're going to read, come Shavuos. Right, this is the essential giving of the Torah. Many commentators note that the first commandment is a positive command. I am Hashem your God. The second command is a negative command. You shall have no other gods before me. Right? So we have the two basic contrasts of mitzvah saseh, positive obligation, and mitzvah lo saseh, a negative prohibition. And the Medrash describes that the two, and many commentators speak about how all of the positive mitzvahs of the Torah, they're rooted in Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God. That's what they're all for. That's what they're all particularized expressions of that idea. And all of the negative commandments of the Torah are all particularized expressions of the basic idea of don't have any other God other than me. So don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, because any of these other things that you're doing, you're elevating something else to the ultimate rather than me. And so all of the negative commandments of the Torah stem from the negative commandment of the second commandment. And those first two commandments were said at the same time, were spoken to the Jewish people at the same time in one utterance, whatever exactly that means. We can't really conceptualize how you can say two things at once. But both things were said at one time, simultaneously to the Jewish people. And the Jewish people heard both of them simultaneously, but were able to process them as individual expressions. Rabbi Eliashiv notes that this is the essential nature of the Torah. That, yes, I have positive commandments, do these things, these are good things. I have negative commandments, don't do those things, those are bad things. And yet both of those are somehow wrapped through Torah, through the revelation of Torah, are somehow wrapped up together. And there's actually no difference between them. I can express both of them. Good and bad, positive and negative, can all be expressed in one utterance, because ultimately they're all joined together into one.
Great. Now, compare and contrast Moshe and Aaron, everything you just said, to Yaakov and Esau.
So Yaakov and Esau, these are brothers that didn't do as well as Moshe and Aaron, right? They didn't get along, they had problems. It's interesting to think about why they had problems. They're clearly different people, right? The Torah describes very clearly, they don't begin from different people, actually, by the way, right? The Torah describes that they're twins, and when they're young, there's no difference between them. And then the Torah says, as they grow older, now they grow apart. They grow into two different types of people. Yaakov wants to sit in the tents and be, a contemplative introvert learning Torah and reflecting on God and the universe all day. And Esav becomes a man of the field and goes out and hunts and builds and does all of the outdoorsy things.
Manly man.
Manly man, yeah, he's a manly man. The professor in me is, whatever. Okay, fine. In any case, yeah, right. So Esav is this outdoor, extroverted, externalizing manly man, and Yaakov is not a lumberjack. Let's put it that way, right? So they have different natures. Their different natures begin to manifest as they grow older. The problem I think we see is not that they're different from each other. Moshe and Aaron are different from each other, very, very different from each other. Part of the problem, Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch talks about this, and others mention it as well. But Rabbi Hirsch is perhaps boldest in stating this. What goes wrong with Yaakov and Esau is that Yitzchak, their father, wants them both to be the same thing. Yitzchak wants Esav to be Yaakov. And Esav lives his life trying to convince Yitzchak that he is indeed a Yaakov. And so no surprise that later on Yaakov has to try and convince his father that he's an Esav, because this is sort of how Yitzchak is working. But Yitzchak is not someone. I mean, again, not to psychologize Yitzchak, but just to take what the Torah teaches us and what the commentaries tell us about Yitzchak. Yitzchak is rooted in Gevurah. Yitzchak is not a person who sees the unity in diversity.
He wanted to see unity and similarity.
Yes, right. There's right and there's wrong. There's right and there's wrong, and my sons all better be right. And so what goes wrong part of what goes wrong with Yaakov and Esau is that you now have two brothers trying to play the same role instead of complementing each other. You have them each trying to play a different role. The Arizal actually notes that the soul of Esau comes from a much higher place than the soul of Yaakov. Esau had the potential to be infinitely greater than Yaakov had he leaned into his nature, who he was, which is a material, manly man person. And if he had leaned into that and been a godly, manly man, instead of being a deviant, harmful, evil, and destructive manly man, that's a much, much greater thing than Yaakov could have ever achieved. Because Yaakov is only doing one thing. Esav had the potential to synthesize both of those things within his own person, but that's not what he ended up doing, in part because it was never cultivated, as Rabbi Hirsch explains. But here you have a pair of twins, a pair of brothers, who come from the same place, who have inherently different natures that manifest as they grow older and they start to grow into themselves. And instead of allowing those things to develop and guiding them so that each can complement the other by doing what they do and appreciating that neither one is offering everything, instead, you had a situation where they're being shoehorned into roles that are inappropriate for them. Yaakov is being shoehorned into a role that is also not appropriate for him in the sense that everything is riding on him. Right. And that's not appropriate either. Not everything is supposed to ride on Yaakov. Ideally, what's supposed to happen is everything is supposed to ride on Esav and Yaakov.
Yes, I heard that the plan was that they would both be the fathers of the 12 nations between Leah and Rachel.
Now, Yaakov learns the lesson, right? Meaning Yaakov later on in his life is able to mend his Yaakovness, and grows into Yisrael. And then he becomes the father of 12 tribes who, although they go through rupture and difficulty, ultimately unify into a single entity despite their very, very particular differences with each other. Yaakov is able to do the thing. In the next generation that he cultivates, he creates this unity of diversity.
Let me ask you a question. Something just came to mind, because we're going to sort of touch on this idea too when we get to the tribe of Zevulun. We think of the neshama as the highest level, but wouldn't it be true that from the spiritual realm, the nephesh, things that are closer to mundane and earthly, are from that perspective higher? I mean, they have the potential to be elevated the most.
Not only do they have the potential to be elevated the most, but the fact that they appear lowest shows that they're concealing, they're trying to communicate something that's much, much higher. There's an idea found in many of the Kabbalistic writings that describes how the highest expressions, the most sublime and esoteric expressions of godliness have to be enclosed in the most material things in order to have any grasp of. Because if I have a bright light in a room, okay, the bright light might hurt my eyes, so I can put on a pair of sunglasses, weak sunglasses. But when I look at the sun, I have to put on very, very, very strong sun. So likewise, when I'm trying to have some grasp and encounter very, very sublime and high, lofty, unified expressions of the divine will, they can only, in order for them to be graspable in any way, shape, or form, they have to be very materialized. And so the lowest things, the nefesh, for example, right, the material aspect of the soul, or the aspect of the soul that expresses itself most in materiality, is actually hiding the very, very highest aspect of the divine. It just takes a lot more, there's a lot more work to uncover it, and it's much harder to see. But once you see it, that's the thing. Which is no different than what we were talking about earlier, that the goal is to move from unity into diversity and to a much higher unity that comes through that diversity, which hides the original unity. That's the same thing. When I can uncover in the material soul, in the nefesh, right? In the lowest aspect of what's really there, then I'm given access to something that's incredibly, incredibly, incredibly high. Just like by working through the materiality of the world over historical time, we ultimately encounter the light that was hidden during the 6 days of creation, the unity of everything that's much deeper was encountered or could have been encountered.
The very idea of what we were experiencing in the wilderness when we were asked to go to Israel with the sin of the spies, like why it was so difficult, because it's easier to be either a Yaakov or an Esau, but to leave a spiritual existence and bring spirituality into the mundane is very difficult. But that Hashem's saying, like, but that is the purpose of creation, is to find the unity within multiplicity and the differentiation where things seem hidden.
That feeds very nicely into Zevulun.
Yes.
Right. So I think that's right. So the tribe the tribe associated with Sivan, or the tribe that manifests the energy of Sivan, is the tribe of Zevulun. In the sort of system of the 12 tribes, Zevulun is often associated with commerce. It's interesting. I've never quite worked this one out because Zevulun's territory is not coastal, but for some reason, Zevulun is associated with a ship and overseas commerce. And I've never quite worked this one out. It's just an interesting tidbit.
That is interesting. I assume he had to work with the other tribes to get to those
Yeah, so
coasts.
maybe that was part of the point. That could be part of the point.
It was interesting that, in the month of giving of the Torah, that this partnership with him and Yiscahar, that who sat and studied Torah, I would have initially thought that this would be their month.
Right.
But it's Zevulun.
Right. We have these two tribes, Yisachar and Zevulun, who are sons of the same mother. So we have another pair, right? And they're not literally twins, but again, another pair. And you would expect, right, that they have this famous partnership described by the rabbis that based on verses in the Torah that Yisachar study Torah, and Zevulun, who are engaged in commerce, they enable Yisachar and support Yisachar in their study of Torah. So like you're saying, you would expect that the month of Sivan would manifest, the month of Sivan, the month of the giving of the Torah, would manifest as Yisachar. That's the tribe that is created by this same energy Torah study. But apparently that's not the case, right? It's the tribe of Zevulun that's created by this month, or by the energy that creates this month.
And I believe Moshe blesses Zevulun first.
Yeah.
Near the end of the Torah, which all ties in this very reason too. Because it seems like Zevulun and Yiscahar are almost a Yaakov Esau relationship.
Right. So you have this a similar kind, right? You have the manly men of Zevulun who are, going out on ships and trading and doing, business and so on and so forth. And then you have Yisachar, who are sitting and learning, just like Yaakov. And here, better than what turned out with Yaakov and Esav, at least here, Zevulun and Yisachar are conceptualized as a partnership. They're supporting each other. But just like Esav, the material manly man really comes from a much higher place, because to spiritualize materiality, to uncover the spirituality within materiality, is much, much, much deeper. And really, that's what Torah is for. But that's why we have Torah. Zevulun is playing that same role, except they're doing it appropriately.
And they were out engaged in commerce for the reason of supporting Torah.
Right, for the reason of support. But it's not just, I think this is an important, oftentimes the Zevulun-Yisachar partnership is thrown around as well. Zevulun goes and does business, and then they give their money to Yisachar so Yisachar can learn Torah. That's true, but it's at the same time, I think it's really critical and very important to also appreciate that there's no way that this works in a healthy and appropriate way unless Zevulun's own actions are themselves a form of Torah. Those two have to be Torah. You need people studying the books of Torah, right? You need people devoted to that. But like many of the commentators on the Shulchan Aruch, the Magen Avram and the Bach, all talk about this in connection to the blessings we say on Torah study every morning, where we only make them once a day. And all the commentators ask, why is it that if I have to make a bracha before I study Torah, why is it okay to make it once in the morning and then I don't have to do it ever again the entire day? I say it in the morning, and then I say some Torah afterwards to fulfill the bracha that I've just made, and then I go and I pray, and then I have breakfast, and then I go to work, And then, maybe I listen to a shear or a class in the middle of the day during my lunchtime, and then I go back to work. And then after my workday ends, I get back in my car and maybe I'll listen to another class in the car on the way home. And I come home and I eat some dinner and I spend some time with my family. And then maybe I go back out and I learn Torah for an hour at night. And why don't I have to make a new blessing each and every time I go back to studying Torah? Just like every time I go back to eating another apple, I have to make a new bracha on the apple. And so why aren't we doing this every time I take off my tzitzis and put them back on? I make a new bracha. Why is it that we make one bracha for the entire day? So there are different answers given to this, but one answer that I find particularly very taken with, and it's developed extensively by Rabbi Yitzchak Hutner, who was a profound thinker, American rabbi who he was the head of the yeshiva Chaim Berlin in the mid, and he writes about this quite extensively. But the basic idea is that you only make one bracha at the beginning of the day because your entire day is Torah. It doesn't matter whether you're reading a book. Torah is not reading a book. Yeah, you also have to read books. But Torah is a lens through which it's a way of doing things. It's a lens through which you approach everything. And you can be constantly osek b'Torah. You can constantly be busy with Torah, regardless of what you're doing. You don't have to be actively learning Torah to be osek b'Torah. You are actively engaged in Torah every time you think of the Torah implications of what it is that I'm doing, or you're connecting what it is that you're doing to God, because the whole point of Torah is that point of connection between our world, our material world, our worldly world, because the Torah speaks in worldly world terms, right?
Right.
Do this, don't do that, eat this, don't eat that, build a sukkah, don't work on Shabbos, but work in the other days of the week. It speaks in worldly terms to human beings, like when Moshe goes up to heaven and the angels say, are attacking him and saying, why do you get to take the Torah? And he points out to them, well, this Torah doesn't speak to you guys. It speaks to me. It talks about parents and you have no parents. And it talks about don't murder people, but you guys aren't jealous of each other, so you don't kill anybody, right? And it says don't steal, but you don't have property, so what are you stealing? And don't commit adultery, but you don't have wives and you don't have spouses and you don't have the sexual urges. So none of this is relevant to you. It's a human Torah for human people in a human world, but it's that thing that is connecting us to God within that human world. So every time we connect to God in the context of our humanity, we are being osek in Torah. We are building Torah, creating Torah, busy with Torah. And so we only make one blessing in the entire day. So Zevulun as well, just to bring it back, right? Zevulun as well, Zevulun, who is going out and doing commerce and so on and so forth. If they're just doing commerce in a totally material way, totally ensconced in the material world of finance and commerce and so on. That's all they care about. That's what they're doing. Let's make as much money as we possibly can. Ha ha ha. Whatever, right? Use all the anti-Semitic tropes you like, right? If that's what they're doing, then they have no business supporting Yisachar. Nothing good can come of that. That's dirty money.
Right.
Right? Zevulun has to, in addition, right? There always have to be people learning the books.
They had to learn.
They had to learn.
Yeah.
They had to learn. Now, again, are they learning they're clearly not learning all the time, but you have to have a foundation to be able to look at the world and look at all of your activities through the lens of Torah. And so you have to be learning Torah. And Zevulun is not only learning Torah in order to go out into the world, but but when they go out into the world, they're also doing Torah. They're not learning Torah, they're doing Torah. I would put it that way.
Right. Exactly. I think that's the key point is the majority of the Torah has to deal with financial matters. So the way to really take that Torah from Bina to Das and actually live with it is to go out and engage with the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that sense, there's another partnership at play here in terms of Yisachar and Zevulun. It's the partnership between the people who are the sort of those who engage in Torah in sort of the pristine, abstract, removed sense, which is important, and those who then take that Torah and bring it out and apply it into the world, which is another important partnership, right? The Torah of Yisachar, if there is no Zevulun, it's unactualized. It's just pure potential, right? The Torah of the Beis Medrash, of the study hall, if not then taken out into the world, is just potential Torah. You need people taking it out into the world and actually doing something with it in order for that Torah that's being studied to then become actualized.
Right. But on the other flip side, the Zavulun side needs someone constantly engaged in it that can teach them and help distill it down in a way that they can then go out in the world and know how to apply it. And I think there's an aspect too that within each of us is a Zavulun Yiskar, like a Yaakov and Yisrael. We learn and then we sit in our office or in the shul and we learn, but then we're going out into the world and bring what we learn with us. So we're sort of oscillating between those two realms as well.
We hopefully should try to integrate these things on a communal level, right? Again, we have this diversity of roles and we try to integrate them and appreciate why each one is doing something the other can't do. And together they're doing something collective that needs to be done. We can do this internally within our own selves. I spend time learning and I spend time then not learning, but applying what I learn. And both of them have to be present and I have to integrate them my learning time can't be isolated and cordoned off from my other time in the sense that the two have no relationship. My business time is my business time. My learning time is my learning time. I learn several hours a day, so that's good. And then I go into the business world and I do whatever the heck I want. Those things have to be integrated in order to be a whole person. When they're not integrated into each other, we're like a Yaakov and Esav fighting inside of ourselves. We have a Yaakov and Esav fighting with each other. Rachel, right, their mother, Yaakov and Esav's mother, when she's experiencing these two parts not integrated within herself, these two twins not integrated with each other within her own womb, she says, Lama zeh, no, I don't need any of this, right? Like, who needs life if the experience of life is just this constant bifurcation of the self into these two totally unrelated parts? The goal is to integrate. The goal has to be to bring them both together.
And so now the whole idea of Zavulun not only being the tribe for the month of Sivan, but it really does bring a lot more clarity to Torah, as you discussed. I've started a series called From Bina to Das, which I'm just really trying to focus on this whole area of taking what we learn and how to integrate it into our lives. And it's very hard. But the first 4 years of my life just in the world with no Torah. And as I started learning Torah, and I sort of wanted to just retreat and live in a Torah world and come to a community and just hibernate in this world. But I have to go out into the world. And I'm realizing now that that's the purpose of it all.
Super hard. And because it's super hard, the truth is, I don't think we have enough good role models about how to do it so hard. We have good role models in this and we have good role models in that. And we don't have good role models in both most of the time, or the ones that are out there don't get enough press.
Right.
Because they're not as interested. Because really, the integration is hard plotting work. It's not exciting and it doesn't look fancy on the outside most of the time. So it's hard. It's hard for that. The other thing I would say is, sadly, the mere fact that someone's a religious Jew successful in the business world does not equate to what we're talking about, unfortunately. You're a religious Jew here till you leave. You wake up early in the morning and you study Torah for a couple hours and you go to shul and then you leave and you go to work. But your work or your business or whatever is not being done necessarily just because you wear tzitzis and a yarmulke or put on tefillin that morning. Is not necessarily being done through a lens of, this is all Torah. I'm involved in Torah right now. I'm connecting the things that I'm doing to the divine, and all of this is holy. And that perspective, it's not so common. Maybe some people, I think it's more common to say, well, the things that I'm doing right now are valuable because they enable me to sit and learn for 3 hours in the morning, or they enable me to pay for my kids' yeshiva tuition. But that's just turning the material business commerce activities into a means to an end. But to turn those activities into an end in and of themselves, because these activities, the way I do them in and of themselves, are engaging and connecting directly with the divine through Torah and with Torah, because there's no difference between them. This is a Torah activity. This is running my business ethically. This is asking myself hard questions about how, and yashrus, right? Being straight and honest and so on and so forth. Every time I make a business call, when I undercut somebody, I ask myself whether the Torah wants me to, is it okay to undercut them, not undercut them? Businesses have to survive. I can justify all sorts of things to myself. It's much more comfortable if those kinds of questions are not really on the table.
I did an episode not too long ago based off of Baal Salam, teaching on living in this paradox, really, of the reality that we control no outcomes. We literally have no control whatsoever on how much income we have and how much money we have at any point in time. We have to live with that and accept that reality. But At the same time, we have to be totally engaged with the world as if we did, which is very, very difficult to be engaged in it and keeping in mind that I'm not controlling the outcome. And then the question comes, well, why did Hashem create the world this way? For this very reason, because it's through those engagements with the world and other people that allows us to take the Torah we've learned and actually bring it into reality, into physicality.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Right. It's not that. I like that a lot, actually. I like that a lot because really it's a powerful way to avoid the trap of, well, either I work to make money or my money's going to come to me anyway. And so why am I working? So there has to be some other purpose to the work that we do. The money is just the byproduct. It's not the reason we do it. And one does not drive the other because technically the two are unrelated to each other. The money's going to be there regardless, one way or the other. Why am I working? Not for the money. I'm working because it's an opportunity to bring godliness into the material world.
I've had to sandwich all my work day. I put my calendar is Hishtadlus. That's why I put my calendar to label it correctly, and I sandwich it between Torah for this very reason, because it's very easy once you're engaging in the world to not lose sight of that and think that I'm controlling this. It's tough. But that is the idea of Torah. And that is why the tribe of Zavul and everything we've been discussing is about the month of Sivan and why this month had to be structured this way to accept Torah, because that's what Torah is.
Yeah, go ahead. Which also then the same idea again is playing out in terms of the letter Zion, right? The letter of this month. Zion is the number 7. The letter Zion is the number 7. Zion also as a word is related, or in terms of linguistically, when I think the letter Zion, I think of the word zeh. This. The rabbis say that, when at the splitting of the Red Sea, the Jews say zeh Keli van Vegu. This is my God, and I will glorify him. And the rabbis explain, what does that mean? This is my God, and I will glorify him. The Jews had such clarity about the divine at the Red Sea. And that experience gave them such clarity that they could, so to speak, they could point to him and say, this is him. There's something, again, God forbid, we can't say that there's a material aspect to the divine, but Zion almost points to a materialization of things that are not material. And so, again, that relates also to this idea that right, the Torah is really ultimately about this idea of being able to take the immaterial and bring it down into the material, so that the two are reflective of one another. It's also the 7th day of the week, of course. Right? Zion is 7, and the 7th day of the week is Shabbos. Shabbos is Tachlis Maaseh Shemayim Ba'aretz. We say every Friday night in the prayers. We say that Shabbos is the purpose, the goal of the 6 days of the week is Shabbos. Why do we have 6 days of a work week? Just so that we can integrate them back into each other on Shabbos. We have separateness, we have scatteredness, we have things pulling us in different directions, we have obligations, and we have this sense that we have to work in order to achieve, because if we're not working hard to achieve what we need to achieve, we won't have the things that we need all week long. And then Shabbos comes, and we say, as soon as Shabbos begins, candles are lit and the sun goes down. It's as if at that point, everything that needs to be is already done. And we just be instead of do. And that's really the same idea. Again, it's this drawing the materiality, the scattered materiality of the week, into a unified sort of calmness and peace, and that is present on Shabbos. So that's the letter Zion does this as well in terms of Shabbos.
Even I was reading the shape itself. There's a shape of the Zion is a yud on top of a vav.
Yeah.
Which the yud is that unity, that original spirituality idea. Typically we see it, and then the vav is something that is a kav that brings it into materiality.
The conduit, right? The conduit to bring it downward. It's interesting, by the way. The I don't know when you're going to release it, but the Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the Ramchal, the author of the Mesilas Yesharim, etc. His yahrzeit, the anniversary of his death, is this Tuesday, tomorrow, actually, tonight,
Okay.
tomorrow. No, tomorrow night, Wednesday, sorry. And he makes this point. Others make this point also, but he makes it very strongly. He says that when we talk about the Kav in Kabbalah, when we talk about this idea that God creates the world through this thin ray of the infinite light or the infinite will of God that's injected into the empty space of materiality where God's presence is not obvious, the Kav is Torah. Torah is literally the Kav. That's what the Ramchal talks about. He has fascinating essays that he wrote about the idea of the kav and what the kav represents, and its association with kivui, with hope, and it's the thing that provides us with hope, and that there's something more than what we're currently in, because it's a line that pulls us upwards towards something that's higher than us. But he says specifically that the Torah itself is this kav, that the thing that carries godliness into the world is Torah. It's interesting, Rabbi Nachman and others talk about how the kav is a deep and fundamental paradox. Because the kav is described as kav or ein sof, a line of infinite light. That's a paradoxical term. If the light is infinite, then it's not a line, right? If the light is infinite, it doesn't fit in a line. It doesn't fit in a ray. It doesn't fit in a pipeline. And if it is a pipeline, then the light is not infinite. It's measured and limited. But nevertheless, the kav is kav or ein sof. It's described as it's a ray, it's a line of infinite light. And this is exactly what Torah is. Torah, the Gemara says that God gives the Torah, the first word of the Torah being given is Anochi, which stands for Anna Nafshi Kasavis Yehavis, which is Aramaic for I have given you my soul. God is saying, I've given you my soul in writing. I've reduced a soul into material form. We were talking about black letters, the writing is limited. Writing is inherently limited. The Torah itself is a limited in our experience. Just to be clear, our experience of the Torah is a limited body of knowledge. It's rules that distinguish between these and those. It covers some things and not other things. There's only so many words and there's not other words. There's only so many rules and not other rules. There are 613 commandments, not 614. There are 600,000 letters, and as tradition says, not 601,000 letters. There's a limited form of Torah. And nevertheless, that limited form somehow holds, so to speak, God's soul, which is reduced into writing. The Torah itself is a profound paradox.
One of the things that you're emphasizing that I've come to see more and more in my learning that I've been struggling with is this idea that the more you learn Torah, the more you have to learn to accept these paradoxes, like the ones you're just describing, like the one I was describing of knowing everything comes from Hashem, you control no outcomes from being engaged in. It's like it's one paradox after another, which is a whole nother idea of, even at the idea level, at the reality level, is two different realities coexisting together.
Yeah.
In one.
It's the very definition of what Torah is. This is why the rabbis say, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim, that these and those are all the words of the living God, right? Torah itself is fundamentally a paradox. It's rooted in paradox. The whole nature of Torah is paradox. It's infinite godliness contained in a finite material medium. How does that happen? It's miraculous. There's no other way to describe it. Because it's miraculous and because it's a miraculous thing that holds this paradox that through it we can access infinity, no surprise that we're constantly encountering paradox as we encounter the Torah. And the Torah is constantly reminding us that when you encounter this paradox, don't be so caught up in it. It's okay. It's okay. The Gemara, it says in many, many places, the Gemara in Chagiga says that you're going to encounter Torah and you're going to find opinions that say yes and opinions that say no, and kosher and not kosher and tough for the same thing. And there's paradox, conflict, disagreement. And the reminder, the Torah, the Gemara rather, anticipates that you're going to encounter this and throw up your hands and say, I give up. What's the point of all this? How am I supposed to learn anything? And the Gemara's response to that is not, well, here's how you should learn it. All its response is, just remember, it's all from one source. It's all from one source. Somehow it's all actually unified with each other. It's all one thing. Yeah, you're encountering paradox. That's fine. It was Lag BaOmer last week, one of the famous disputes between Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who we celebrate on Lag BaOmer, and the rabbis. And the rabbis living in the immediate aftermath of the Second Temple and the Bar Kokhba revolt, they came to the conclusion under their circumstances that Torah was going to be forgotten from the Jewish people. And they found verses in the prophets to support this idea that Torah is eventually going to disappear. We're going to forget about it. We can't. Look around us, and here there are verses predicting this exact scenario. Torah is going to disappear. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, nonsense. Torah is not going to disappear. No, what's going to happen, there's going to be confusion about Torah. There's going to be lack of clarity about Torah. But that doesn't mean Torah is disappearing. On the contrary, Torah is thriving. In a certain strange, paradoxical sense, the deeper we get into an unclarity about Torah, the closer we are to figuring out how all of that unclarity and diversity of opinion and dispute and paradox and contradiction all fits together. If we don't have an appreciation of the confusion, then we're stuck with sort of simple Torah. When you tell a preschooler, here's this story and that story from the Torah, and everything fits in very nicely. But that's like level 1 Torah. But the goal is, right, as we said before, the goal of Torah is to move us from unity into diversity and confusion back into a much higher unity, which can only come through diversity and confusion. And therefore, likewise with Torah learning itself, we have to complicate and become confused and pick pieces apart and get really into the nitty-gritty confusing details of things, so that from those nitty-gritty details and from that confusion, we can then draw a much deeper and higher unity from it. And that's the entire point. That's where Torah is trying to get us.
Rabbi, I want you to now get a little more abstract, but I think it'll sort of bring all this together and bring more clarity by speaking to something you shared with me via WhatsApp texting yesterday about how Torah emerges from Tiferes.
Yeah. So Torah, from very, very early on, Torah is closely associated with the sphere of Tiferes. So the sphere of Tiferes is the Zohar describes that this is the body, sort of the trunk of the body, the torso of the body. And the Zohar describes how Tiferes is kind of a sphere of integration. So you have, before Tiferes, if you sort of work your way down the chart of spheros, you have, and you've done this with Rabbi Maisel and extensively, so hopefully most less appreciation for this. But if you start from the embodied spheros, right? The embodied spheros begin with Chesed, and you have Chesed on the right side, Gevur on the left side, and below that, integrating the two of them, you have Tiferes. And then further down, you have Netzach, you have Hod, and you have Yesod, but those also are connected to Tiferes. Tiferes is sort of the connection point for 5 other spheres. And so collectively, you have this system of 6 known as Tiferes or Zer Anpin, that is the embodied spheres, right? Above that, you have what are called the Mochin, the spheres of consciousness, which are not really embodied. Our thoughts are not embodied exactly. And we think our thoughts in our brain, of course, but they're not really, we don't feel our thoughts in our body. We think them in our head, but they're not less tangible. They're less physicalized. But Chesed, Gevur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, these are centered on the heart. They're often associated with emotion. Emotion is embodied. We feel our emotions in our body, at least those of us who have been to a little therapy and are capable of being sensitive to these things. But we feel our emotions. So these are the embodied spheres. All of those embodied spheres revolve around and are tied directly to Tiferes. So Chesed and Gevur are associated with the right and the left arm. Netzach and Hod are associated with the 2 legs. All of these stem from the trunk of the body, the torso, and they're all attached to it. And Torah is associated, or Torah comes from, or emerges from, in a celestial sense, right? In an otherworldly sense, in a purely spiritual sense, it comes from the sphere of Tiferes. And this is because, as we've been talking about, Tiferes is a sphere of integration. The Kabbalists are very much emphasize the idea that Tiferes is not balance. Tiferes, don't think of Tiferes as a balance between Chesed and Gevur, between kindness and strictness or structure or regulation. It's not right. Balances of things. When I balance things, I have to take away one in order to have more of the other, in order to keep things balanced. If Tiferes was a balance of Chesed and Gevura, that means that like there's a zero-sum game. There's 100% called Tiferes, and it can include any combination of Chesed and Gevura as long as it adds up to 100. So if I have more chesed, I have to lose some tiferes. So chesed can't be fully expressed. If you have 100% chesed, you have to have 0% gevura. And if I'm going to have 100% gevura, I have to have 0% chesed. And if I want to have both, then I have to have 50-50 or 60-40 or 75-25, but nothing is fully there. But the Kabbalists emphasize that Tiferes is not that. Tiferes is integration. Tiferes says that I have 100% chesed, 100% gevura, and somehow, again, paradox, back to paradox and the idea that we can somehow have paradox coexist through Torah held all at once without having to compromise any side of it. Tiferes says I have 100% chesed, 100% gevura, and it's all in one package and it's all there fully. Neither one is compromising the other. Neither one is taking away from the other. And that's what Tiferes is. And it does this for all of the spheres that are attached to it. It kind of sort of pulls from all of them, integrates in itself, and then sends it outward to be expressed as a single entity further down the line. So this is what Torah is. If we want to understand a little bit about what Torah is going into Sivan and Shavuos, which is the month of the giving of the Torah, what the Torah is ultimately a tool, a medium of integration. It is the taking of all different little bits and pieces of things, all very different bits and pieces of things, whether it's different rules like positive mitzvos and negative mitzvos, whether it's different people in the sense that different has a unique part of the Torah. And so now within the Torah, what does that mean? That means that all Jews with all of their different unique expressions of Torah are all somehow present and integrated seamlessly and peacefully in a sense of more complete wholeness within Torah. If it is a completeness of the joining of created being and creator, likewise, typically we say, as much room as I make for myself, God can't be present there. And as much room as I make for God, I have to make myself small. But within Torah, we have something that we don't have to do either. Torah, remarkably, is a space within which I can be big and God is big at the same time. Not egotistical, not haughty, but I can fully fill the space with Torah because I am learning Torah through my unique lens and expressing and revealing and developing my lens of Torah. And specifically through that, God is more present, even though there's so much of me. So Torah is this miraculous thing that is able to hold these contrasting paradoxes, not contradictions. Contradictions mean I have to pick one or the other. Only one can be true. Paradoxes, both are true. And both are true at the same time, even though it's sort of impossible to see how it can be, but it is. And so Torah, again, stems from Tiferes, is associated with Tiferes, is this tool within which we can find integration. If we're willing to allow it, if we're going to make space for everybody within Torah, we're going to acknowledge that everyone has something unique and a unique angle and a lens and a path to contribute and express within the overarching unity of Torah, then it works. Then it works, and it brings everybody together. As the Torah says, that the Jewish people camped in the singular in order to receive the Torah. They camped at the foot of the mountain. It says in the singular, they camped, not they camped, but he camped. He camped. Rashi brings from the Medrash that he camped, not they camped, because at that point, in order to receive the Torah, the Jewish people became like a single entity. Their diversity didn't disappear, but they became a fully integrated unity of diverse elements. So that's what Torah is ultimately.
Beautiful. We'll end it there. That was amazing, Rabbi. I appreciate it once again, you being here with us and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed the episode and found it meaningful, please take a moment to rate, review, and share the podcast.